So what we want to do now, we have been talking about this for the past year, about how do we think about ill-being and well-being, is go a level deeper and think about, so what drives these outcomes? Probably a lot of you have engagement surveys, culture surveys, pulse surveys that pick up some of this stuff, how engaged, how are my people feeling? But what actually drives these outcomes? So again, head back to Tessa to talk to more data.
Yeah, so it's really kind of hard to think about the psychological underpinnings of well-being at work, partly because it's a huge, messy space, and quite frankly, academics like myself, we don't even necessarily agree with each other on what these things are. So what we've actually tried to do at MindGym is come up with these kind of big psychological categories of things that actually have clear behavioral underpinnings that are attached to each of these. And what we've done is kind of categorize these drivers, so these things that predict your well-being at work, into these 5 different categories that are, there's a little bit of overlap between them, but overall we actually find that they operate pretty independently of each other. So the first is certainty, this idea that you feel clear about the next weeks and months at work, that you can actually predict what's happening. In my work, I study certainty a lot. It actually tends to be the biggest driver of well-being. The minute, even if you have all of these other things in place, the minute you remove certainty for people, a lot of these other things kind of start to get discombobulated a little bit. So this idea that you can predict what's going to happen, that when your boss emails you and says, I need to meet with you over something important, how's next Thursday, that you know what's going to be happening in that meeting, and you don't spend between now and next Thursday super anxious about it, right? This feeling like what might be coming might not be good, but you actually can predict it. Human beings love predictability. The minute you take it away from them, it's really hard. We know from our own research at MindGym and other research that during the pandemic, having CEOs tell people, we don't actually know what the work from home policy is going to be, but as soon as we know, we'll tell you, just moved the needle on certainty much more than just saying nothing at all because they didn't know. So even these kind of subtle forms of communication that you can do are hugely predictive of well-being at work. Competence. My work makes me feel competent. A lot of this actually comes from certainty over how you're going to be evaluated. So if you don't actually know whether what you're doing is what your boss wants to see or not, you're not going to feel competent. So this isn't just about performance, about doing well. It's about actually this kind of internal sense that what you're doing is actually you're on the right path. Autonomy. I have a chance to change things in the organization. I actually like to think of autonomy as a much smaller construct. Autonomy at work is things like, I pick where we're going to have lunch. I can pick my parking spot. I have control over the temperature of the office. There's this one beautiful study I love showing that if you give people, control over the temperature of their office, it moves the needle on performance like 20%. So sometimes we don't think about these small things that can actually make people feel like they have some say over what's going to happen today, tomorrow, in their work week. Belonging. I have meaningful relationships at work. So this doesn't necessarily mean you need to have a lot of strong friendships at work. It means that you have strong social ties that can teach you how to move up, that can give you those skills training, that you have what we call the hidden curriculum, that know how to go to if you need help for something. People who come into the workplace as newcomers, first generation, coming from a different culture, they don't often kind of feel the sense of belonging because they're not naturally folded in to the existing infrastructure, to those kind of network ties that we know are important. And then purpose. This is a really tough one to grapple with. I mean, I, for one, have never been able to kind of figure out the magic of making people feel passionate about the work they do. But when you don't have that sense of purpose, you fall into that category I showed you called boring out. So you can show up to work, I'm not stressed, but I just honestly don't care what happens here. I'm not interested in kind of making things, making contributions to this organization. So needing that feeling of passion or purpose. But we also know if you have a lot of that and you're also really stressed, then you can find yourself as a fragile thriver. So purpose is a complex thing. We don't always just want to turn it up all the time, right? Sometimes if we turn it up, and we don't address some of these underlying stressors of well-being at work, like stress and anxiety, you can actually push people into a category of ill-being. So these things are all kind of very complex, but what we're hoping to do at MindGym is take these big psychological constructs and then break them down into their behavioral components, things that we actually can sort of directly achieve or tackle with in the workplace.